Good evening and welcome to our update from the Superintendent event for Durham Public Schools. My name is Chip Sudderth and I am the Chief Communications Officer for Durham Public Schools in the Office of Public Affairs. Very grateful for you all for joining us tonight. I'd like to introduce our American Sign Language interpreter, Charles Storrs. Thank you very much for helping us with tonight's event. We are streaming in English and Spanish tonight, and we are grateful for all of you who are watching. We've received a small number of questions through our engage.dpsnc.net portal tonight, and we will be able to go through those questions relatively quickly. And after answering those questions, if you have more, we will be posting an extensive frequently asked questions file to the DPS website in the next 24 hours with more questions and details. Some of the questions that were submitted tonight are school specific, and we'll talk about why some of the decisions that have been made are being left to the schools in the future. We hope that the information that we share with you tonight will encourage you about our return to in-person instruction, about our support for our students who will still be learning remotely, and express to you our commitment to making the next few months of the school year safe and effective and engaging for students, teachers, staff, and family alike. We'll begin with a few remarks from Dr. Pascal Mubinga, our superintendent, and then we'll follow with remarks from our lead nurse, Tricia Howard, and our chief operating officer, Julius Monk, and then we'll go to your questions. Family members, community members, any teachers and staff who are watching, we appreciate you and thank you for your time tonight. Dr. Mbenga, please.
Thank you, Mr. Sudderth. Good evening to all our family members, also to all our stakeholders. Thank you for choosing DPS, and thank you for trusting us with your children. It's been almost a year since we have been educating our students remotely. I cannot really imagine how much you have been able to sacrifice in order to accommodate us so that we can teach your children remotely. We just made a decision recently to be able to open up our schools so that our students will come and be able to learn in person. We really want to meet the needs of our students, academic needs, social, emotional needs as well. While every parent have options, those who chose to keep their kids for remote learning, and now we are also excited to be able to provide this option for the one that would like to bring their kids for in-person learning as well. DPS families, let me assure you this. It has been almost a year since DPS started planning on safely reopening our schools. We've been working really hard. We're able to involve teachers, administrators, central as well as school level administrators, and parents as well. They were part of our task force to learn together how we can safely reopen our schools. And we are very excited. Starting next week, we'll be able to put all these things in action. We can do it really well in DPS. We have all the PPEs that's required to make sure that our staff as well as our students, they are going to be in a safely environment as we will be educating them. We are here to answer your questions, concerns that you submitted to us. This is really a good platform to be able to address those concerns. And I know there have been a lot of anxiety because there was some information that folks will learn from social media. But I will always refer you to our website where you can find the most valid information about our district. Our staff are really excited to be able to welcome our students. Last week on Friday, I was able to visit 7 schools, and today I visited 5. As a matter of fact, I was in one of our elementary schools, Easley Elementary, met some teachers there excited, really excited, say we've been waiting for this moment for a long time. And I'm excited as well on Monday to be able to see our learners coming back in our buildings. It's gonna take all of us, staff, parents as well, to make sure that we're going to be able to navigate this pandemic, educating our students in a safely manner as possible. Trust us, we trust you, and we can do this together. Back to you, Mr. Sato.
Thank you, Dr. Mabenga. Since March, my team has been working with lead nurse Tricia Howard constantly. And when I say my team, I mean all of our team, all of our district leaders who have been working with our learning centers and with our employees who have been on site to keep them safe during time of COVID-19. Nurse Howard's personal experience as our lead nurse has been invaluable to us, and we wanted to give her a chance to talk about the safety measures and our faith in our ability to provide a safe, healthy learning environment for our teachers and our staff, and especially our students. Nurse Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Stoddard. Good night, everyone. I'm going to say and echo again that it's been quite a year. We've been on a roller coaster ride since March of last year. I think when I reflect on this year, thinking back to all the things where we were in March last year, not quite knowing for sure what this would mean, whether we were going to close, to the closure, hitting April, I remember being home stuck with my children, wondering how long is this going to last? Looking up CDC recommendations on self-care, as I heard more and more people having difficulty navigating the shutdown, teachers expressing concerns about just not doing well in the shutdown. And then trying to figure out where my role was in all of this as a nurse. I signed up with the DPS Foundation to distribute food at Southern. And that was the first time that my eyes opened up to the amazing people that we have here at DPS and in our community. People who showed up and helped families who were in need. And then we transitioned into task force meetings and discussing opening up of learning centers and the anxiety and the fears that existed. But as we went into training, we did walkthroughs, we rolled out, we opened the doors, and seeing how people were expressive of the anxiety, which was normal. But as we encountered situations that we've never encountered before, something that wasn't in the protocol that we had spent hours writing, and the telephone calls, numerous telephone calls. Nurse Howard, can you give us your feedback on this? And for what I didn't have the answers to, I hounded the health department, and they graciously educated. And the more we got educated, the more anxieties came down and the more equipped we felt in dealing with situations. And then we had our first case. And let me tell you, the amazing leadership that I sit with today, I just want to tip my hat off to you guys, because I was never alone in getting those calls of a positive case. No matter how late at night, weekends or holidays, this team was here. And they practiced with an abundance of caution about the safety of our students and our employees. And that is what makes me confident as we move forward. We navigated athletics, we educated parents, we educated students, but most importantly, we answered questions. And for the questions that we didn't have the answers to, we hounded the health department. And they once again would rise to the occasion. Yes, Trish, what do you need now, Trish? They came on Zoom calls if needed. But more importantly, we also had the ABC collaborative physicians who answered every phone call and would stop at nothing to make sure we had the answers we need to make those determinations in a safe way. So as we look at reopening, I want to say, I am confident that we could do this. We've learned a whole lot over the past few months. We've had situations, we've researched, we've read. And I want to say I'm so confident because on top of everything else, we have now realized that the safety measures that have to be in place cannot be compromised with, right? If we're going to open and we're going to do it safely, we have to make sure our safety protocols are tight. And it's not just for our employees. It's the role that our parents and our community will play in assisting DPS in this rollout. But I'm confident because once again, I have seen more people volunteer. I have seen more people say, Nurse Howard, how can we help? And it is that mentality that's going to get us through this. I've spoken to many people, staff, families of students, some of our most vulnerable students that I have spoken to. Nurse Howard, do you think I should come back? What do you think? And we've had those difficult discussions. As I say, you need to talk to your provider and have them guide you as to whether or not this is the best move for you and your family. This is a difficult time, but I'm confident we're going to get through this. I'm excited that we're here at the 1-year mark, but I also know that we know way more today than we did last March. So I say, let's educate everyone, the children, the parents, the employees, and let's have a reopening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nurse Howard. I appreciate you. Next, for some brief remarks about the safety procedures and precautions that we're taking in Durham Public Schools, is our Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Julius Monk.
Thank you, Chip, and good evening to Dr. Mavanga, Cabinet, and our families that are out there watching tonight. Thank you for having us and giving us an opportunity to share with you our plan for operationalizing all of those safety precautions that Nurse Howard spoke about. I would like to first start by saying a great deal of what we're using to operationalize the plan comes from the Strong Schools North Carolina Public Health Toolkit. It was just revised again last Thursday. Not a lot of changes associated with it, so we're in good shape there. But it has really laid out for us what the requirements are to open up safely and even provided some recommendations. In addition to the Strong Schools Toolkit, we're also using what the CDC describes as the 5 key mitigation strategies. And what they are, the first 3 you've heard quite often in the past year. The first one is making sure that you are wearing your mask correctly, maintaining your physical social distancing, and hand hygiene. I think we all know the 3 W's, we've heard them. They've added a couple more of mitigation strategies that when you listen and you go to some of their web material, it talks about the Swiss cheese and layering on to those things. One of those things is cleaning and maintaining our facilities throughout the day, right? To make sure that we're hitting those high touch areas and keeping them disinfected. And then the last one is contact tracing. Now, contact tracing has primarily been handled by a health department up until this point. We're going to be automating a daily screening for our symptoms and then integrating that with contact tracing activities so that we have a clean, streamlined approach of gathering information that are related to individuals who may be experiencing symptoms or may come in contact with someone with COVID-19, and then have a clear path to make sure that that information gets to where it needs to be, especially with the health department, and getting those individuals to a place where they can seek help and get further medical guidance. In addition to meeting those requirements and those mitigation strategies, we're also implementing several of the recommendations found in both of those documents. The first is the use of Merv 13 filters throughout the district. Historically, our filters have been Merv 8 or Merv 10. And what that is that's the amount and size of particles that are filtered, pulled out of the air, depending on that Merv rating. And according to ASHRAE, which is a society of mechanical engineers, the MERV 13 filters and higher give you efficient way to pull out viruses from the air. So we're happy to report that to this point, all of our elementary schools are complete, and 82% of all of our school facilities have received those filters. And by the time teachers and students return for our middle and high school, we'll be at 100% with the filter replacement. That's thanks to all the hard work that our facilities services department has been putting forth. In addition to that, we want people to understand that those same cleaning regimen that we have in our school buildings, thanks to our top-notch custodial staff, we'll also be implementing that as we disinfect our buses between the routes. So in the school buildings, where we will be doing the disinfecting of desks and doorknobs and things like that, our bus drivers between their routes, after they drop off students at their school destination, will go through, do all our seat belts, handrails getting on the bus. In addition to all of that, and Dr. Mabanga spoke about it a little bit earlier, we have enhanced our PPE. Like I said before, you know, the PPE that they talk about is primarily just having a face covering. But in addition to that, we have different types of face coverings. Not only will everyone receive 5 reusable cloth masks, but they also have an option of having disposable surgical masks or KN95 masks. In addition to those face coverings, we also have face shields for our students and for our staff, if they choose to use those. So we're feeling very confident about our measures that we have in place. We are eager to have our students back in the buildings with us. And we look forward to next Monday when we'll have our littlest ones with us.
Thank you, Dr. Monk. We're now going to start with the questions that were submitted to us through our portal at engage.dpsnc.net. And the first few questions are largely about the educational experience. And to do that, I'm going to ask the questions of our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Nakia Hardy. And the first question asks, it's a broad but an important question. How should parents prepare students for in-person learning? What supplies do they need? And what will be the process if a teacher becomes ill?
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. So just as Dr. Monk and Dr. Mabinga and Nurse Howard mentioned, we are looking forward and ready to receive our youngsters on Monday. So there are a couple of things. All of our schools will be having communication events. So they will be potentially virtual open houses. There will be things on their website, as well as communication from the principal, maybe robocalls, and from teachers regarding any specific supplies that you may need for the school year. We know that we would like for, especially our youngest ones, if you have the opportunity to begin building the stamina in terms of wearing a face covering. As Dr. Monk mentioned, we will have face coverings provided at our schools, but if we can build the stamina for our youngsters, that would be very, very helpful. And we will definitely also have opportunities throughout the school day for scheduled mask breaks. I think there is another part in addition to supplies in regards to, I think Mr. Sutter, the other part was if someone becomes ill.
If a teacher becomes ill. And
so we, as Nurse Howard discussed, we have been operating our learning centers since August. And one of the tools that we will have in place, as Dr. Monk mentioned, is the opportunity for our screening app, which our students will have the opportunity to use. And that will also assist us with contact tracing. When and if there is a positive case and your child is impacted due to a close contact, we will communicate with you to let you know that. And then we will also share with you if there does need to be any closure. That could be a classroom, a pod, a hallway, or the whole school, depending upon the severity. But know that every case is different. We will work very closely with our nurse team to ensure that we are making sure that we're doing our best to keep our students safe and to reduce any further transmission of COVID-19.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. The next question is aimed at our families with children in secondary schools, that's middle and high schools. So we are offering our in-person learning on a rotating cohort. And the question is asked, when will parents be notified of their child's cohort to plan for their off-site days?
Our specialty high schools will be returning to in-person on March 18th, and our teachers will be returning on March 15th. Those 4 schools follow our community college calendar, and they are on spring break during this week. So on Monday, you will be notified by your school of your youngsters' cohort, A, B, or C. Prior to that, we will be working with public affairs to share with not only with the district, but also with our schools, our district cohort calendar. Know that that is tightly aligned to transportation. So all of our secondary schools will follow the same cohort rotation. So 2 days of in-person instruction, and then the next 4 days are an additional cohort, and then they return for 2 more days. And so that will also be on our district website, and then that will be how we will follow transportation. So specialty high schools will be notified on Monday, and then our middle and high schools that will be coming back after spring break will be notified prior to spring break of their cohort assignment.
Our next question involves students with IEP or 504 plans, and they're asked, and the question is, will students who have an IEP or 504 plan have the option to attend all in-person days and not just the assigned cohort days?
At our elementary schools, our students have the option to, if they have selected in person, then they will attend all days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Our secondary students will attend with their cohort. There are some groups of students that will have extended opportunities. Our separate setting students will attend 4 days a week, and we will also have extended opportunities for our students who are in our centralized programs for our deaf and hard of hearing and visually impaired programs. For our families that have students with disabilities, we encourage you to reach out to your case manager and or your EC facilitator if you have questions about your youngster's schedule and services that will be provided if you have selected in person.
Our next question is a bit of a tough one, but it's worth asking. I'm concerned about the impact of the return to in-person instruction will have or is having on our teachers, students, administrators, and everyone involved. How are you going to handle the division that has taken place and rebuild community and trust with everyone involved, including parents in the Durham public school system? It's a tough question, but this has been a hard time for a lot of families and a lot of staff. And Dr. Mbinga expressed an interest in responding to that question.
Thank you, Mr. Sada, for that particular question. As we are facing this pandemic, the division that we are seeing in Durham, we can also see that in other part of the state as well in the country. We are very committed in Durham. We operate really well as a family. We've seen it, as Nurse Howard said this, when it came time for us to be able to feed our families, we saw everybody stood up and were able to help. As a matter of fact, even when it comes to be able to provide devices to our students, we saw that DPS Foundation was able to raise enough funds from corporate as well as individuals. That is giving us hope about the values of Durham. I know these moments that we're going through, it's going to be up and down, but at some point, as we are engaging our families, as we're looking at the values of Durham, I'm very confident that we're going to all come out of this not divided, but we're going to start reconciling our differences, and we're going to be in a better place. It's going to take work. As far as DPS is concerned, we're going to do work with our teachers. We see some of them are now feeling comfortable because they are folks that they have been home since March. They have not been in any other places. The first place they're going to go is going to be schools. That's a sacrifice. We are fully mindful of that. We're going to work along the way with them to get them to a better place. To our families, those who chose remote learning, as well those who chose in-person learnings, I've seen a lot of interaction on the social media, but trust me, we are going to do our part to be able to bring folks together. That we are DPS, we want all that is good for all our students as well for all our families. But it's also going to take some efforts as well to our elected officials, which I'm going to challenge them, I'm going to ask them. It's going to take us to come together as a community as we are addressing the needs of all our students. It's not going to be easy, but I'm hopeful that we're going to get there in a better place.
Thank you, Dr. Mavinga. Our next question comes from, is back to talking about in-person learning. And it says, under what circumstances will the cohorts for in-person learning be reduced to allow for more in-class instruction? Let's see here. I apologize. A couple of the questions have been overlapped. Dr. Hardy, could you talk a little bit about the reason for the 3 cohorts and if there is a possibility of cohorts being reduced to 2 in secondary schools? What are some of the challenges with that?
As Dr. Monk was speaking earlier regarding the recommendations and mitigation strategies that we have in place, one of those is around appropriate social distancing. And we wanted to make sure as we accommodate opportunities for in-person learning that we are able to do that, not only at the school, but also on the bus. And in an effort to do that, we need to have 3 cohorts so that we can not only transport our youngsters, but ensure when they do arrive at school, we are able to provide instruction in a socially distant manner. At this time, we do not anticipate being able to reduce to 2 cohorts.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. This next question, it could go equally to Dr. Hardy and to Dr. Monk. Did DPS engage school systems in neighboring counties which have successfully begun in-person learning to identify lessons learned and modify its plan accordingly?
Absolutely. I will definitely let Dr. Monk speak to this, but we have, both of us have participated in multiple calls and really leaned on learning from other school districts because that has helped inform our planning, our decision-making, and we are hopeful that, and we know that it will prevent us from making some or any missteps that those districts experience that opened prior to our opening.
Yeah, and I just want to echo what Dr. Hardy said. We both sit on a large district meeting that happens every couple of weeks. It initially was almost every week. And then separately, she sits with chief academic officers from around the state and I with chief operating officers. In addition to what we're doing within the state, we also both participate in national conversations around reopening the schools. The Council of Great City Schools has been a very big help, at least as it relates to operations. And we're out what are going to be the best practices for getting our students back in school and keeping them there safely. So I would like to thank everyone from around the state, around the country for being open to sharing lessons learned. And guess what, folks? People have learned things from us too, even though we hadn't opened yet. And so we're a big family when it comes to education.
Thank you, Dr. Monk. And I might ask that you turn off your cell phone because we're getting some radio frequency interference on your microphone right now, just in case that helps. Our next question is related to planning. Is DPS making plans for fall 2021 learning options in the unfortunate case that normalcy has not returned? And if so, what do those plans entail? I think one of the things that we could talk about is the fact that we are now a one-to-one school district and that we are going to have technology as part of our learning come what may.
All right, let me get started with that one, then Dr. Hardy can jump in as well. So this is what I'll tell to our parents and all our stakeholders as well. So we are really excited that we're going to open our schools next week. In the month of April, we're planning to come to our board and bring a plan for summer programming. So after summer programming, we're going to have a plan that we'll be bringing as well for 21-22 school year. So we are pretty much here together with other counties in the state. We are opening our school for spring, as we're going to open our schools as well for summer. And definitely we're going to have a plan to be able to open our school for 21-22. Those plans will be coming to our board very soon, maybe around May, but we have some lessons learned that we have to go through as we're opening our schools, and that's also going to advise us how we're going to make adjustment moving forward. Dr. Hardy.
Thank you, Dr. Mbenga. I think the only thing that I would like to share is I think we spoke about it in a previous question, is regarding Ignite Online Academy. Our families will have the opportunity next school year to have online instruction if they choose that that's the best for their youngster. And they'll hear more information about that process later in the spring.
Our next question, and I'm going to paraphrase it a bit because it's a longer one, but it's asking if schools will have the flexibility to have staggered entry for the first week, so staff can help students learn where they need to go. The person who is writing just feels like it's all a little bit overwhelming. Could you talk a little bit about the schedule and how the schedule for reopening schools was determined?
So our teachers returned this week, and our principals and teachers have been working very closely with our operations staff to make sure that we're identifying appropriate entrances for screening, so that we can make sure that the youngsters that have made the decision for in-person learning have the opportunity to get to their classroom and get to know our school building, since they have been away from it for a year. And for some of our youngsters, this will be their first time attending and seeing that particular school building. We will only be opening our elementary schools on March 15th, and then on March 18th, our specialty high schools, and then our secondary schools will open after traditional school spring break on April 9th. And so there is some staggering in terms of the grade bands. We did want to maximize as much opportunity for in-person as possible, given the fact that we are opening in March. And so there will not be staggered by grade levels, as some families are accustomed to in a traditional opening. All of our youngsters will join us on March 15th at our elementary schools.
The next question, and you're a very popular person tonight, Dr. Hardy. Our next question is about Ignite Online Academy. The questioner asks, I understand that Ignite will be a separate school offered in DPS next year. If families opt into Ignite next year, will they lose magnet school placement? And I think this would be a good opportunity to sort of remind people what Ignite Online Academy is. And it's going to be a little bit different from what we were describing it this year before COVID.
So when we begin the next academic school year, 21-22, Ignite Online Academy will be a K through 12 virtual school. And families will have the opportunity to make that selection in the spring and to select that as their school opportunity for the upcoming school year. Our families that are at this time, families have received and have claimed their magnet seats. We know those magnet decisions and school decisions are tough choices, and how competitive it is for some of our magnet schools. We want you to make the best decision for your youngster. If you do select Ignite Online Academy, you will, at this moment in time, you will be relinquishing your magnet seat for the 21-22 school year. However, all of our families have the opportunity, when the magnet window opens again, to apply for our magnet programming. So our magnet fair traditionally is in October or November. And so in the fall, we will have a magnet fair, and then we will have our magnet window that will be opening. Traditionally, it opens in January. And so if you do make that choice for your family for next year, please know that you'll have the opportunity to apply for our magnet programs for the upcoming school year.
Everything paused on my end of the screen for a moment there. There were a number of statues showing up on my screen. I hope my connection is stable. First time for everything. My next question is coming from, this is actually I'm going to combine about 3 or 4 questions here, because we received a number of questions that are ultimately school specific about the nature of scheduling of virtual and in-person instruction, whether classes would be combined or that learning would be happening simultaneously in person or virtually. And there is not one good answer to these particular questions, because we don't know the school that the person who submitted those questions is assigned to. So Dr. Hardy, could you talk a little bit about the different kinds of learning environments that people may be experiencing and why we are allowing some of our schools to go in different directions than others?
Due to the timing, we know that we are close to the end of the academic year. And when our middle and high school students return, it will be the last quarter of the academic year. We have worked with our schools to prioritize that our students have the opportunity, to the extent possible, to keep their same teacher. And we know that that is something that is important not only to our families, but also to our teachers and our students, because they've been working with that teacher virtually for almost the entire academic year. And so what we know, once we made that decision as a priority, that does mean that some of our teachers will be teaching students who are coming in person and students that have families that have made the decision for them to remain virtual. We want our families to know that it is also a priority to us to maintain that two-way communication. And that two-way communication that our students have with their teachers can look in a variety of formats depending upon the school. So in some of our schools, there will be opportunities where students will be able to connect via Zoom and work simultaneously with the teacher while the teacher is in person. There will also be times throughout the day where the teacher will group students, some of the in-person students and some of the students that are virtual, in breakout rooms and talk to them and work with them on particular assignments or learning tasks. There will also potentially be the opportunity that there would be office hours where teachers would connect with individual students or potentially groups of students. So there are a variety of ways that families and students that have decided to remain virtual will have the opportunity to connect and have that two-way communication with their teacher. Also, one of the things, and we talked about it earlier when we transitioned to virtual learning, and we really want to thank our board for their commitment and the community, we adopted a learning management system, Canvas. And that system allows our teachers to communicate with our students on an ongoing, regular basis, as well as to use other digital tools. So I can link things into Canvas so that my students can also have access to other tools to support their learning. So that will still be there for our in-person students as well as our virtual students, to make sure that our students are connecting and progressing throughout the academic year on their learning targets and standards as we close out this particular school year. And as always, just one more thing to add, we want to remind our families about Parent Portal so that you can check your students' progress and their grades. But if you have any questions about contact with your particular student, reach out to your child's teacher or principal.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Will DPS offer a learning center option for middle school students on their off-site rotation days?
We will not have learning centers available for our middle and high school students on the off cohort days. However, we will have our community education program available for our elementary families. And as of last week, I think we already had over 200 families that had registered for our before and after care programs. So those will be available at our elementary schools.
The next topic is Senate Bill 37, which is a bill that did not become law. And the question says, did DPS account for legislative mandates for in-person learning in its planning efforts?
Absolutely. We've been working on our return to in-person, I want to say forever, but since the summer, as well as in the fall, and then of course, following very closely the legislation with Senate Bill 37, and really wanting to make sure that not only that we understood if it were to become law, but that we were able to work with our community to ensure that we had those mitigation strategies and recommendations that Dr. Monk mentioned were in place for our families. So yes, absolutely, that has been a part of our planning.
Dr. Hardy, you have been a marathon runner tonight. We've got just one question left for you before we go into some different areas. I'm going to paraphrase this question because it it reveals some very personal information about a student. But the general question is about children, exceptional children, students with disabilities, and masks, and whether and how we will handle situations where masks may not be indicated for a child.
So I think it's really important that we continue to, as we make the decision to return, that we reiterate the importance of the strategies that we have to have in place. And one of the things that we know is that wearing a face covering is extremely important as a proactive strategy. We have worked closely with our principals to develop a face covering procedure for our schools. And so in that face covering procedure, it does talk about some proactive ways to make sure that we're encouraging our youngsters to always wear their face coverings, as well as have opportunities for breaks throughout the day for our students. We also know that there are going to be students with extenuating circumstances. And for those extenuating circumstances, there is a accommodation process. So for any family with a youngster who they feel may not be able to wear a mask, we do have an accommodation process. And you can go through that process, and our schools will work with you to determine what the next steps are for your student. Dr. Monk also mentioned the toolkit that we have been using. And in that toolkit, it does speak directly to age groups of students, and especially our youngsters that are 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. And so we are expecting all of our youngsters to wear face coverings, but for those very young youngsters, we will be working with them in alignment to the toolkit to build stamina for those students, as well as to make sure there are additional strategies within that classroom for those particular youngsters in terms of wearing face coverings. And we will also provide redirection if there are students, their face covering falls down, making sure that there are opportunities for redirection. But it is so important that prior to returning, we want all of our families to encourage our youngsters and build the stamina to wear face coverings. We know how important that is in preventing the spread of the virus.
Dr. Hardy, you can take a bit of a break. We've got the next question, I believe, is going to Dr. Alvera Lassane, who is our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources and who has become quite an expert in the field of COVID-19 vaccinations. The question is, will there be vaccinations available for every teacher or staff or personnel who decides to educate students in the classroom?
The answer to that question is yes. We have been successful thus far in providing opportunities and sharing those out, while overall implementation is moving to other groups, other priority groups. We have still enjoyed wonderful partnerships, not only with the Department of Public Health, but with other entities within Durham. Even today, I reached out to some of our partners to say I have a list of transportation workers that I need to get vaccinated, and they're already responding to that. So as employees let us know, I would also like to say that as individuals have different circumstances, that maybe the timelines that we initially started did not work for them. So we continue to be in the vaccination business. So if there are any employees that wish to be vaccinated, they will reach out to Human Resources. We will identify those opportunities. Even though we may not have a scheduled reserve space for DPS, we will coordinate those efforts.
Thank you, Dr. Lassane. And our next question is on the subject of PPE, personal protective equipment. That's a question for Dr. Monk. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. Our school principal informed us that DPS is providing masks and cleaning supplies to all teachers and staff. But what is the policy? Will students provide their own masks, or will the masks be provided to them? If the latter, where are those masks coming from? And then a related question about that is who is paying for those masks? And there is a reference to some teachers requesting masks and other cleaning materials from parents. So Dr. Monk, if you could talk a little bit about what PPE will be available and what cleaning supplies are being provided and how that's being funded in Durham Public Schools.
Certainly. So as I said at the beginning of the meeting, each student and staff will receive 5 cloth face coverings that are reusable. We actually received that from the state back at the beginning of the school year. In addition to that, we've also purchased surgical masks that are disposable in case someone mask break or they misplace it sometime during the day, or they show up to the bus stop without one. We'll have disposable masks at the bus and at the schools. At every school, there is a PPE administrator. So staff members need only contact the PPE administrator to get their allotment of PPE. That administrator is responsible for maintaining the inventory and being cognizant of whenever that inventory is getting low, so they can put in a request to the warehouse so that we can bring them a reinforcement of PPE. This process is already underway. We've been using it since staff has returned back to central offices. And so we're confident that we'll be in good shape as it relates to PPE. As far as schools making requests for additional items, I think that's what schools do. Even pre-COVID, they asked their families, they asked PTA to help, to bolster and to provide extra. They want to be careful. They want to make sure that everything is where it needs to be, and that's good. And actually, that's what we want to see our schools doing is wanting to stay on top of things. As far as the district is concerned, though, we have a good process in place. We have PPE at the warehouse, we have PPE at the schools, and we have a process from getting the PPE from the warehouse to the schools and then to the people who need them.
Thank you, Dr. Monk. The next question, the policy or plan for students that refuse to wear masks, Dr. Hardy already covered. So I'm going to go to the next question, which asks what deep cleaning will look like and what kinds of supplies and equipment will be used. I have seen video that we've produced showing bus drivers using spray foggers and things like that on buses for disinfecting purposes. You can't go into the whole laundry list of equipment, but could you talk a little bit about the kinds of equipment that we are using? Certainly.
We do use electrostatic sprayers. That is a time-saving piece of equipment that we use for disinfecting. As I mentioned earlier, there are several areas, high-touch areas, that we'll be disinfecting continuously throughout the day, restrooms, entrances, things like that. And then at the end of each day, we'll be doing our cleaning and disinfecting of our occupied spaces. And that's all at the schools. And then on the buses, we would do cleaning and disinfecting between each route to make sure that we are keeping on top of making sure that we're not leaving, items that may transmit COVID-19 or any other type of virus. So we're going to take that cleaning and hygiene very seriously. In addition to what our custodial support is doing and bus drivers, we're also, another item that teachers can request are wipes, as well as their own bottle of the same disinfectant that our custodians are going to be using for their classroom.
The next question, Dr. Monk spoke to a lot of this at the top of the meeting. What safety measures are you taking to help limit COVID exposure? Nurse Howard, if you would, aside from the operational side of things, could you talk again, just very briefly, about contact tracing and just those levels of safety measures that we'll be taking?
Absolutely. So when we do have a positive case or an exposure, it's very important for us to act quickly. One, we want to be notified as soon as possible. So if whether it's a student or a teacher, we want to be notified in a timely manner so we can start that contact tracing. The person who's positive is easy. They're going to isolate for 10 days. However, we need to speak to that person who's positive so we can identify the people they've been in close contact with. And close contact is defined as being less than 6 feet of someone for longer than 15 cumulative minutes. When a close contact, when we find out how many people meet that close contact definition, the next step then is to notify those people so we could extract those people from the building as quickly as possible. As I said, the goal, if we practice those protocols, we practice our 3 Ws, we should have no close contacts. So it's not that we won't have positive cases, but we're hoping to have 0 close contacts when we're finished with everybody understanding their role in wearing their face covering, staying more than 6 feet apart if possible, right? We need to have those things in place. The risk factor increases the more close contacts we have. So when we talk about whether we need to close a classroom, that's easy if it's contained. That teacher hasn't been all over the building, there were no close contacts, you notify the parents in that classroom. If that teacher has wandered the hallway, has been in the teacher's lounge, had lunch with someone, you could see how that could potentially increase the risk to the building with more close contacts being identified. So the bottom line is, if we practice our safety protocols to the T, which I'm saying that is the absolute, we must make sure that we're practicing those safety protocols. Then when we do have a positive case, we have 0 close contact. If we don't have 0 close contact, once we have identified the close contacts, if any, we quickly identify them, we extract them. So they're going into quarantine for 10 days. I hope that helps. But as I said, my goal is to have 0 close contacts. 0 close contacts, guys.
Thank you, Nurse Howard. And then the last question is one that I will take, and it is related to the staff town hall event that we had yesterday. I grow increasingly concerned about the respect paid to our teachers and staff by the Office of the Superintendent. The hot mic incident at the end of today's webinar was not amusing in the least. To yell "time to party" while teachers, principals, and staff are worried about their lives, their health, their safety, and their way forward was like a final insult on top of all the rest. I love the teachers of my children, but it seems their administrators care only for themselves. And as Chief Communications Officer for Durham Public Schools, this is something that I need to respond to. One of our employees who was working on the technical side of the town hall event was very happy that the technology went off without a hitch, and expressed that enthusiasm without recognizing that the mic was on. Having talked to that employee, I know that no disrespect to any teacher or staff was at all intended. But I also recognize that these are real tension-filled times. There are mixed feelings about the return to the classroom. There's fear, there is concern. In some places that there is anger, and in some respects, our community is divided. To the extent that exacerbated the pain, I apologize. As again, in talking to that employee, no disrespect was ever intended to any teacher or staff member. And that runs us to the end of the questions, and we have just a few minutes left in our hour. And I would like to turn it over to Dr. Mbinga for final remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Souther, for facilitating this conversation. Thank you to cabinet members and all the panelists that were involved in this process. To our families, we're excited that we are going to bring our student back starting on Monday. I will advise you to be able to time to check our website where we have our dashboard. We are very transparent. We'll be sharing with you information related to COVID. In addition to that, I've heard a really high interest of our families and the community members willing to come and be able to volunteer in our schools. We have an easy process when you go to our website to be able to volunteer, and then someone will get in touch with you. So wherever we'll be able to need you. We can open our schools in a safely manner as possible. As I said this before, it's gonna take effort from all of us. Learning loss. I'm excited that we're starting this in spring. We're gonna start addressing those learning loss, especially for those students that did not feel comfortable to learn remotely. And then summer, we're gonna have other opportunities to be able to address those learning loss. And then next fall, we'll be ready to be able to welcome all our learners again. And we know how to educate our students. We are really proud of the work that we've done, and we are going to address those learning loss. Thank you to our families for trusting DPS. We are really grateful that you send your kids to us. We are going to do our due diligence to make sure our protocols will be followed so that everybody will be safe. Back to you, Mr. Sadef.
It wouldn't be a Zoom event if I didn't mute and try to speak. Thank you all very much for your time tonight. There will be more information to come, and we appreciate everything that you do for the students, teachers, and staff of Durham Public Schools. Have a good evening.